In this video, we're going to look at the slope of a polar curve. First of all, let's recall that if we have a polar curve, r of theta, or a polar function, the Cartesian parametric equations are x of theta will be r cosine theta, and y of theta will be r sine theta. Okay, so because if I have this graph, the r tells me how far I am from the origin. The theta is the angle from the positive x-axis, and then the two components, the x part and the y part, are the adjacent and the opposite legs in a right triangle. So that's where we get r cosine theta and r sine theta. Now, in order to get the derivative, you can either memorize this following rule, dy dx equals, or what I tend to do is just take the derivative of y and the derivative of x. So dy d theta divided by dx d theta for the same exact reason as we had for parametric equations in the previous videos, which doing product rule will end up being, we take the derivative of this first, so I have r times the derivative of sine plus sine times the derivative of r all divided by r times the derivative of cosine, which is negative sine, so negative r sine theta, plus cosine times the derivative of r, so r prime cosine theta. Now, again, you can memorize this and just sort of fill in the pieces as you go. I tend to just do the product rule. It's one fewer thing for me to memorize. But if you don't memorize this final result, you do need to recall that this works because of parametric equations. So let's see an example of this working. I want to find the Cartesian equation of the line tangent to the polar function r of theta equals sine 3 theta at theta equals pi over 4. Sorry about that. So I need to first see that my x is going to be r cosine theta. So I have r is the sine of 3 theta multiplied by cosine theta. My y is going to be r sine theta, so that is the sine of 3 theta times the sine of theta. And now, in order to get the equation of the line, I need a point and I need the slope. So let's find the point first. So if I evaluate x of pi over 4, that's going to be sine 3 pi over 4 multiplied by cosine pi over 4. And I want to find y of pi over 4. That will be the sine of 3 pi over 4 multiplied by the cosine of pi over 4. The sine of 3 pi over 4 is, of course, root 2 over 2. The cosine of pi over 4 is also root 2 over 2, which gives me 2/4 or 1/2. And sine of 3 pi over 4 is still root 2 over 2. Cosine of pi over 4, this should be a sine, sorry. Sine of pi over 4 is also root 2 over 2. Root 2 over 2 times root 2 over 2 is 2/4, which is also 1/2. So my coordinates of my point are 1/2, 1/2. need to find the slope. So I need to find dy dx. Well, I'll take the derivative of y, which will need product rule. So I'll do sine times the derivative of sine of 3 theta. So that's sine times 3 cosine 3 theta plus sine of 3 theta times the derivative of sine. So that's going to be cosine theta times sine of 3 theta. And in the denominator, I'm going to take the derivative of x. So that's going to be sine of 3 theta times the derivative of cosine, which is negative sine. So I have negative sine of 3 theta times sine of theta. And then I have cosine of theta times the derivative of sine, which is 3 cosine 3 theta. So plus 3 cosine 3 theta times the cosine of theta. Now, I did this in a little bit backwards order from what I just showed you on the previous slide, but product rule you can flip around like that. So it is still fine, still correct. And so now I just evaluate dy dx, evaluate where theta is equal to pi over 4. The sine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2 times 3. The cosine of 3 pi over 4 is negative root 2 over 2 plus cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. And the sine of 3 pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. All divided by the negative sine of 3 pi over 4, which is root 2 over 2, multiplied by the sine of pi over 4, which is also root 2 over 2, plus 3. The cosine of 3 pi over 4 is negative root 2 over 2. The cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. And so, if I multiply this through, I will get in this part right here, root 2 over 2 times root 2 over 2 is 1/2. I have the negative, so I have negative 3/2. Root 2 over 2 times root 2 over 2 is 1/2. All over, root 2 over 2 times root 2 over 2 is 1/2. 3 times negative root 2 over 2 times root 2 over 2 is negative 3/2. In the numerator, I have negative 1. In the denominator, I have negative 2. So my slope is 1/2. And finally, I can write the equation of this tangent line. It'll be y equals the slope, 1/2, times x minus 1/2 for the x coordinate of my point, plus 1/2 for the y. And graphically, let's see what happened. So here is the function graphed. Here is r of theta equals sine 3 theta. My point where theta is pi over 4 is this point, 1/2, 1/2. And the tangent line there will be this. So there we have it. I hope this helped out. Feel free to comment below if you have any questions.